Well, I was supposed to sit down at the back of the venue with the former British Home Secretary Suella Braverman to have a chat with her. But of course, we left because we feared the police might storm the place at any moment. And the last thing either of us wanted to get involved in were fisticuffs of any kind. So we went away to a hotel. Well, I asked her a series of questions. Her speech was very, very deeply critical of the European Court of Human Rights, and in particular, the recent ruling apropos Switzerland that says that any country that is signed up to the ECHR has to adopt net zero policies. And I went on to ask her whether Rishi Sunak had the courage to do anything about it, and I finished up by asking her, effectively, had Brexit voters been betrayed by the massive immigration numbers? Escaped from Claridge. At some point this afternoon, the police will close it down. I escaped, but also I'm very pleased to say that safely escaped is the former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman. We're here, Suella, because we were supposed to have a sit-down in the venue, but they wanted to close the conference. What do you make of it?
It's pretty astonishing, Nigel, isn't it? Thankfully, you and I got to make our speeches in favour of controlling our borders and protecting our communities amongst like-minded Democrats. Many of us there are democratically elected politicians. Many of us are leaders in our field, academics, thinkers, writers. And it's frankly staggering that the mayor of Brussels has deployed his thought police to cancel what is a peaceful event focused on how we can better represent the millions of people around the European continent.
I felt this morning, if ever I doubted for a minute, not that I did really, but what Brexit was about, the fact this conference was questioning ever closer union within the European Union. And since the judgment, the Swiss judgment recently, the role of the ECHR, didn't that really tell us we're on the right track?
Well, there's obviously that. I mean, the hypocrisy is also astonishing. Only last year, the mayor of Brussels hosted the mayor of Tehran here in Brussels. So he's okay to have the mayor of an autocratic regime in his city. But those of us who want to talk about rights radicalism, as I spoke about today, or standing up for sovereignty and democracy, are, they tempt to cancel us. And I remember the words of Mrs. Thatcher. I'm going to misquote her now, but she said she always got cheered up when she saw her opponents take ever more ridiculous and extremist and far-fetched attempts to shut her down, because it just shows they've lost the political argument.
Yeah, I mean, I'm used to it. I mean, I was barred here from restaurants, barred from coffee shops, pubs, but that was a private thing. I mean, this was, the global media were there, seeing a very respectable, as you say, group of people. I mean, European royalty, Prime Minister coming tomorrow of Hungary. It is truly, truly extraordinary. Are we sort of in danger of slipping back to sort of communism, fascism? And how would you characterise it?
Well, I think it's incredibly concerning that we're seeing here an attempt to snuff out and stamp out freedom of speech. You and I are conservative politicians, centre-right politicians who voted to leave the European Union through a democratic and legitimate process. And here we are trying to explore those ideas, me talking about rights radicalism and the overreach by the Strasbourg court and the totally unreasonable way in which human rights have taken over and stymied the government's ability to stop the boats. The reason why we've not managed to stop the boats in the UK is because a Strasbourg court intervened at the 11th hour through an opaque process without reasons to stop us sending flights to Rwanda. That's what I was talking about here, speaking on behalf of the British people, on behalf of my constituents who've sent me to Parliament to stop the boats. And talking about that surely cannot be a criminal activity.
And of course, by implication from a Swiss ruling, now, as members of ECHR, we have to pursue net zero policies.
You're absolutely right. It was an egregious decision that we saw a few weeks ago from the Strasbourg court against the Swiss government on climate change. The Strasbourg court has totally overreached and usurped the legitimate authority of democratically elected governments. The Swiss people themselves voted in a referendum against so-called climate change, net zero policies, and yet the Strasbourg court overruled that democratic instruction and imposed its own rule on the Swiss government, which really does symbolise a kind of net zero madness. But that's symbolic and symptomatic of the broader problem. That's why I was calling today in my speech that we need to leave the European Convention of Human Rights, and we need to do it now. It's no good putting it in a manifesto for the Conservative Party at the next general election. It's no good putting off the debate. We've had 4 years talking about the boats, talking about illegal migration. We're now on our third Act of Parliament. This week, voting on our third Act of Parliament. We've not succeeded in stopping the boats. The British people are fed up with 30,000 people last year crossing the Channel, £6 million a day being spent on the hotels. I tried, and when I was Home Secretary, to fix this. Unfortunately, I was blocked by the Prime Minister. But I've come to the view, and I was calling for it since 2022, that we now need to leave the European Convention on Human Rights. We need to do it now.
But it's not going to happen, is it?
Well, listen, I will keep calling for it. And if the Prime Minister is serious about stopping the boats, he said he would do whatever it takes. If he really means that, he will do whatever it takes. That means invoking or triggering Article 58 of the European Convention on Human Rights, sending a letter.
Which is 6 months, isn't it?
6 months notice to the Council of Europe, possibly passing an Act of Parliament, because we might need to do that to confirm the departure from the Convention, and actually delivering for the British people, because it's human rights laws, it's the Strasbourg judges, and it's this distorted approach to civil liberties that has stopped us from delivering for the British people. And it's not just the boats, but it's on stopping terrorists from being in the country. It's about deporting foreign paedophiles and drug dealers.
Abu Qatada took 10 years to remove from the country because of ECHR. So I completely get where you're at. So if Rishi Sunak in the next manifesto says, we will continue to pursue our policies, but if the ECHR defy us, we'll consider leaving, should we believe him?
Listen, Nigel, I worked very closely with the Prime Minister on this issue for over a year, and his view, as expressed to me, was that he does not support leaving the European Convention on Human Rights. And we're hearing a lot of noises from him right now. I do believe the British people would see them as inauthentic. I think if he's really serious about stopping the boats, he'll do what is necessary. And what's necessary is invoking Article 58 now. And
he has a parliamentary majority, so he could do it.
He could do it. I believe he could do it. And he could deliver a withdrawal from the convention before the next election. Let's fight the next election on it. Let's force Keir Starmer's hand, because I tell you, it would be great to see the Labour Party campaign to hand back control to Strasbourg, hand back, control over our borders to a foreign court. Let's have that debate. Let's have that debate with the British public. But the Prime Minister has the authority. He has a majority, I believe, to deliver what's necessary to actually stop the boats.
I will watch this space, but not hold my breath. Is it a betrayal?
Listen, I think that it's very disappointing. I myself have battled very hard within government to lower migration. And what I've come up against is institutional resistance, whether it's from the OBR, which, as I said, takes a view... You're sounding
like Liz Truss.
The OBR takes a view which is very opposed to lower migration.
So how does the next election look as a sitting Conservative Member of Parliament? Is it going to be a bad night or a total catastrophe?
Listen, Nigel, I've been very open about my profound concerns about the way the party is heading, and I've been very clear that the Prime Minister needs to change course. Any poll that you look at every day now suggests that we're heading for electoral defeat, and I am horrified personally by the prospect of a Keir Starmer government. He's someone who would reverse Brexit. He's someone who campaigned for a second referendum.
Are you saying constitutionally he'd reverse Brexit by rejoining the EU?
Listen, I would not rule it out, because he's someone who campaigned for a second referendum, and all the indications from his shadow cabinet and indeed himself and his unguarded moments so that he does want closer alignment with the European Union. He would undo what was achieved in 2017 in that historic vote. He would oversee increased migration, and he would not apologise or try to hide it.
Well, I must say that was a very spirited Suella Braverman. It really was. Now, I'm joined down the line from